Rounding out our Theros coverage of what I think will be our last video is the new monsters contained within Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Buckle up, it's going to be a long one, there's a lot to go through, and some cool mythic monsters as well, which may or may not end up being their own video depending on how long this one is. But anyway, if you want to see what they are, stay tuned. Oh no, little Ted, it's a monster! Ah. What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and let's just jump into it. So we're in Chapter 5 of Mythic Odysseys of Theros, Friends and Foes. First of all, this art is absolutely terrifying. Of this giant spider, what is this? Arasta of the Endless Webs. No, thank you. We do also get what I'm going to call a template. Now, it's technically not, and for those of you who are familiar with older editions, the idea of templates is something you're familiar with, and this was you would take an existing creature, which I really like the concept of templates, and I think they could go very far in 5e, is take a creature, any creature you have from any source you have, Monster Manual, Volos, whatever, and you add a template. Let's call it a fiendish template, right? And you apply, so you have like, I don't know, an Otyugh or a crocodile or a T-Rex or whatever, and you apply the fiendish template to those creatures, and now they're a fiendish crocodile, fiendish Otyugh, whatever it is, and that gives them new abilities. So, you know, maybe fiendish gives them resistance to fire and a couple other things, whatever, right? The idea of templates are great because they basically expand the entire game to every monster you already had now has all of the versions that are already there, plus now a fiendish version, or a monstrous version, or a dire version, or whatever. So we have this kind of Nyx-born template, if you will. So we get a Nyx-born origin, kind of how they came to be, and then everyone will get a Nyx-born trait. It says a Nyx-born creature has the normal stats for its kind, but usually has a special characteristic separating it. And it has this d6 table here, but you can see magic resistance, light sensitivity, so it goes positive and negative here, right? Immutable form, magic weapons, Nyx step, which is a small teleportation, I believe. No, sorry. Can move through objects. And then starlight form, where it sheds some light. So these aren't too crazy, but this is kind of the concept that I'm saying that I like. Let's add some other additional traits or abilities to any creature to make them a new version of that. So there's a little section here on classic monsters. I'm going to skip that because that's pretty much just talking about existing monsters from other sources, whether they be Monster Manual, Volos Guide, etc. But they kind of just talk about them a little bit here. We talk a little bit about Nadir Krakens. They're unique beings, of which the terrifying Tomocratus, which we'll get to that. Also, look at this guy. Nadir Kraken is kind of like a crab guy. And they say the Medusas here have kind of snake lower halves rather than humanoid lower halves, so they have constrict attack. They talk a little bit more about the riddles of the Sphinx, and they actually give you some riddles. And then we get into our new set of stat blocks here. So, some of these you'll recognize from kind of Greek mythology. Some of these, I guess, are unique to Magic the Gathering, and I don't believe we do not have pronunciation guides yet for any of these, which is disappointing. So I'm going to go with Amphisbaena, I think is how you pronounce it. It's basically a two-headed snake creature. Nothing too crazy. It's only a snake. So it just has two heads, and similar to Ettins and other creatures with two heads, it has advantage on certain conditions, like it lists here. Blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, and knocked unconscious. It has a bite that does some poison damage, and obviously multi-attack because it's got two heads. Challenge rating 1/2. Next up, we have the Anvilwroughts, which, again, if you remember, that was a supernatural gift you could choose where you basically kind of get the benefits of being a Warforged without actually being one. So you're essentially kind of, I believe this is all Perforos, the Forge God. So you're basically a sort of, almost like a clockwork, if you will. So here's an Anvilwrought raptor, right? So this is basically a hawk or an eagle, but as the art dictates, you're sort of made out of metal. And it just seems like that kind of gives you immunities, right? So the Anvilwrought raptor has immunity to fire and poison damage, charmed, exhausted, paralyzed, petrified, and poison conditions. Has recorded mimicry, so it can mimic any sound or including a voice that's heard within the past 24 hours. People can make an insight check to try to overcome whether that's true or not. And they have dark vision out to 120 feet. So that's pretty substantial. But there's also a variant rule here for Anvilwrought Raptor familiars, which this would be a very nice familiar to have due to all the resistances it has. It has 14 AC and 18 hit points. That's pretty high for a familiar. It has advantage on perception checks, which is nice, and that extended dark vision, also very nice. So the Anvilwrought can serve another creature as a familiar, forming a magical telepathic bond with its willing master. While the two are bonded, the master can sense what the Anvilwrought senses as long as they're within a mile. So here is a bronze sable. I believe this is technically still an Anvilwrought. It is. It says right over here. So this is basically a bronze otter, for lack of a better term. It seems like the immunities are the same. The dark vision is the same. But this sort of otter, is a sable actually a creature? Maybe it is. It could look like a statue. It's got pack tactics. It has a surprise attack similar to what bugbears have, where if it attacks a surprise creature, it does some extra damage, extra 3d6 damage, and 2 bite attacks. We have a burnished heart, which is again kind of like a deer, or in this case, kind of looks like an antler, I guess a ram here. Obviously, as a charge attack, it's a ram type creature. This one, though, if you touch it or hit it with a melee attack, you take fire damage. And it has advantage on strength and dex saving throws to not get knocked prone, kind of that whole goat sure-footedness. And then it has its antlers, and its hooves do fire damage as well. Challenge rating 2. And then we have the Gold Forged Sentinel, which is the kind of ultimate Anvilwrought, which is a challenge rating 5. This one's more humanoid, though. Let's see. All of Perforos' original Anvilwroughts, the construct most difficult to control. Sentinel operates without a master, stalking the high places of the mortal world. So it does have a fly speed. So I guess it's both, right? Is it this guy? Kind of the. Oh, I guess it's sort of this weird like ram with wings, I guess. So it has a charge ability because it does have a ram. It does have spell turning. So it has advantage on saving throws against spells that target only it. And if it succeeds in the spell as a 4th level or lower, it's returned to the caster. Has a ram attack, which you can make 2 of, and then a fire breath in a 15-foot cone. So this kind of spell turning is interesting because I don't think we've seen this since the Crag Cat from Storm King's Thunder. So that's pretty cool. All right. Then we have Archons. So these are... I guess just basically angels, I guess, right? Armored warlords saw themselves as champions of merciless justice. As the Archon overlords toppled, they scattered to the fringes of the world. So we have an Archon of the Falling Stars here. Right there. This is a challenge rating 12 creature, not to be messed with. This is celestial. Immune to radiant damage, kind of makes sense. And charmed, exhausted, and frightened. Has some innate spellcasting spells, Command, Guiding Bolt, Spare the Dying at Will, and then Crusader's Mantle and Spirit Guardian once per day. Magic resistance, it has a mount, which I don't think I've ever seen this before. If it isn't mounted, it can use a bonus action to magically teleport onto the creature serving as its mount, provided they're on the same plane of existence. When it teleports, the Archon appears astride the mount along with any equipment it's wearing or carrying. Radiant Rebirth, if it's reduced to 0 hit points, it regains 30 hit points and springs back to its feet with a burst of radiance. This is once a long rest. Each creature within 30 feet must make a con save or take 3d8 radiant damage and be blinded. So this is kind of similar to the Celestial Warlock. Radiant Spear, just as a spear attack, that does 2d6 plus some extra radiant damage, and then does have legendary actions. 1, to cast Guiding Bolt or make a spear attack. 2, when you make a spear attack, makes a spear attack, and then its mount can use its reaction to make a melee attack. And then 3 is Return to Nyx. Causes a corpse you can see within 30 feet to burst into a shower of radiant stars, leaving no trace of it behind. Everything was wearing or carrying remains. Each creature within 10 feet must make a dex save or take 4d10 radiant damage. And then we have the Ashen Rider. This is a challenge rating 16. This one's slightly different. This is the Lawful Evil version. So you're kind of going to see an antithesis thing going on here. Command, Compel, Dual, Banishment, Blade Barrier. Immunity to thunder damage as opposed to radiant. When a creature starts, it's got an aura of silence. When a creature starts its turn within 30 feet, the rider can force that creature to make a DC 18 Wisdom save. On a failed save, they can't speak and are deafened until the start of their next turn. The Ashen Blade does 2d8 slashing plus 2d12 radiant. That's pretty nuts. It can make 3 attacks with that, or 2 attacks with its Bolt of Ash, which is 120-foot range, 40-10 necrotic damage, and the target can't regain hit points until the Ashen Rider's next turn. It can make an attack for 1 legendary action. It can make an attack using its one of its weapons, and then uses the same amount to move, and then reduce to ash for 3 legendary actions. Choose a target within 60 feet. They must make a DC 18 con save or take 5d10 necrotic damage. And have their maximum hit points reduced by that amount. This reduction lasts until the target finishes a long rest. Target's hit points reduced to 0, it dies. And the Wish spell is the only way to bring it back. And then they have their 2 riders here. Winged Bull, nothing too crazy to talk about, is challenge rating 4. It is essentially just a bull with wings. And then we have a Winged Lion. Again, very similar. A little bit hardier, more hit points, more, I think, AC than the base bull and the base lion. And then obviously they have flight. So if we look at this, let's see how many more monsters we've got. We've got Cerberus, Chimera, Colossus, Demons, Eidolons, 1, 2, 3, 4, Fleece, Lions, Giants, Harpies, Hippocampi, Hoplites, Hydras, Leonin, and then the Ram, Nymphs, Oracle, Phylaskia Returned, Satyr, Triton, Typhon, and Woe Strider. So yeah, I think we're probably going to do the monsters as their own video because we're 12 minutes in and we haven't even got out of the A to E section yet. So yeah, we'll save mythic monsters for their own video. Anyway, let's get on and talk about Cerberus, or Cerberi. So this 2-headed Cerberus is essentially just a combination of a Hellhound and a Death Dog. Unlike the other 2-headed creatures that usually have advantage on these sort of blinded, charmed effects, this one happens to be immune, also immune to fire necrotic damage. It has aggressive, which I think either orcs or gnolls have, where they can move their movement speed towards a creature they're hostile to as a bonus action. Can't be surprised, and advantage on saving throws on being knocked unconscious because of the 2 heads. And then pack tactics, as it is a dog. Piercing, piercing and fire damage bite attack. And its breath weapon is cool. It's a 15-foot cone, but rather than like the fire breath of a Hellhound, this is molten rock, which does fire damage, but it also restrains the creature because the molten rock hardens on them if they fail the save, and then they become restrained and can make an athletics check as an action to break out, or have somebody else do that, or they could just try to attack it and damage the rock and break themselves out as well, which is really cool. And I wish I'd known about this because I just used a monster that was very similar in my homebrew game, and I would have loved to have had this as like a thing to steal for it. And then we have the Underworld Cerberus, which is your 3-headed Cerberus, which is what we typically know of from Greek mythology. However, this one looks utterly terrifying. This one's got 6 eyes or 8 eyes. I don't know how many eyes. Too many eyes is the answer. And I'm going to guess that this is probably a magic card. Like there might be a Cerberus, and then maybe there's an Underworld Cerberus, which is significantly stronger. This one is obviously also significantly stronger. We're going to jump up the challenge rating by 4 up to 6. We're going to go from Dark Vision to True Sight. Makes sense with all the eyes. The same immunities. Still has aggression. Still has multi-headed. Still has pack tactics. Still has the bite attack. Does a little bit more damage. Goes up from 2 bite attacks to 3. 1 for each head. And the breath weapon, which was a recharge. Same recharge, but it now goes to a 30-foot cone. The damage goes up. The save goes up. And it is still restrained by the hardening rock if they fail. The athletics check also increases, as does the hit points of the rock to try to break out of it. And next up, we have Chimera, and this one just looks beautiful. Look at how beautiful this Chimera is, all white and fuzzy here. And then we have different kinds of Chimeras, and what's really cool is a table for customizing them. So we have a Theron Chimera here, which I'm going to guess is this one here with a lion head. It does still have a breath weapon, though, which I thought the only reason Chimeras had a breath weapon is because they were part dragon. And it says, many artistic depictions represent chimeras as an amalgam of a lion, a ram, and a dragon. These beasts appear with nearly endless variations. I don't see anything telling me what the Theron one is, but it has spell turning, similar to the winged lion that we saw earlier. I think it was the winged lion, where it can return spells of 4th level or lower if they target only it. Multi-attack, 3 attacks, 1 with its claws, 1 with its head, 1 with its tail, or it's a breath weapon. It could do that as well. Claw, head, tail attack, and a 15-foot cone breath weapon that does fire damage. 5d12 though, which is nice. And dark vision as well. There is also this customizing a chimera section, which I also very much enjoy because similar to the concept of templates that I had mentioned before, I think that this kind of gives you a good idea to expand upon existing creatures by adding variety. So you can see here for body composition, it gives you a d4 to roll. So let's build a chimera together here, right? So we'll roll. We got a 4, so it's a swamp creature. Its body is that of a swamp creature, a cavern dweller such as a giant lizard or spider. Gains a climbing speed equal to its walking speed and can climb difficult surfaces, including upside down on ceilings, without needing to make an ability check. So all of this craziness with a spider body just gets that much creepier. All right, so it's head attacks. I rolled a 1. So bull horns, if the chimera moves at least 20 feet straight forward towards a target and hits with its head on the same turn, it does an extra 2d6 piercing damage. They must make a save or be knocked prone. You can see it could have a shark bite, which will give it advantage if it doesn't have all of its hit points. A unicorn horn dealing radiant damage, or a cockatrice beak possibly doing restrained and potential petrification. As far as the other body compositions, plains creatures could get resistance to cold and fire damage. A coast creature could get a swim speed and the ability to breathe water and air. And a mountain creature doesn't provoke attacks of opportunity, like basically gets flyby. And we have a breath weapon here. Breath weapon, I rolled a 1. So that's a lightning breath. So it's a 60-foot line of lightning breath. Tidal wave breath is an acidic 60-foot line. Dex save or acid damage and be knocked prone. 3 is a venom spray, which is a 15-foot cone, or be poisoned for 1 minute. And then while poisoned, they take continual damage over the start of their turn. And necrotic breath is a 15-foot cone that is necrotic damage and unable to regain hit points until the end of the next turn. And then lastly, we have tail attacks. We have a venomous tail, so something like a scorpion, kind of a stinger, which in addition to when it hits with its tail, it does, they make a con save or become poisoned. A perplexing tail, that's interesting. The chimera loses its tail attack and makes 2 head attacks when it takes the multi-attack action. Use the head attacks. It has an additional head where its tail should be, so it makes 2 head attacks. Shark tail, when it hits with its tail, the creature is also pushed away. Or constricting tail, which is basically like a snake tail, and then it can potentially be grappled and then also restrained. We have the Colossus of Akros, which is a construct. This looks very similar to our good friend, the walking statue of Waterdeep here. Massive gargantuan creature here, challenge rating 23. Immune to most conditions: charm, exhausted, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, stunned, and unconscious. And then also immune to fire, poison, and non-magical attacks. That's immune, by the way, not resistant. So I like this too. When it drops to 0 hit points, it crumbles and is destroyed. Any creature on the ground within 30 feet must make a dex save, or basically chunks of it are starting to fall off so they could take damage. This is something that I've seen and I've done as a DM of when a large creature is dying, like potential limbs, or if they are made out of stone, like rock chunks and things can fall. But it's nice to see this as a hard mechanic that we could potentially adopt in our own games. The ever dangerous fire absorption. When it takes fire damage, it regains hit points instead of losing them, which is always really good, because if you pair this Colossus, potentially, I don't know why you'd be fighting it, but if you are, And the enemies you could potentially pair this with a spellcaster who could cast like Fireball to damage your the damage as the DM I'm talking at, the damage the party, but also heal the Colossus at the same time. Mutable form, like all constructs, as weapons are magic, and it does double damage to structures as it is a siege creature. It has a spear with a reach of 15 feet and a thrown range of 200, 600, dealing 46 piercing or 48 piercing if wielded with two hands. A sword that does 68, and then Flames of Akros. I said Archos before, it's Akros. Magical flames issue from the Colossus upward towards 3 creature. It can see within 90 feet. Let's make a DC 24 dex save or take 8d8 fire damage. They're also magically caught on fire for a minute, and they take 48 damage at the end of each of its turns. The burning target can repeat the saving throw. So that's pretty nasty. Then we have Demons of Theros. So we obviously know of demons, right? Fiends in the world of Faerun and others, but here it says, on Theros, the term demon encompasses all fiends. The people of Theros might refer to demons or devils interchangeably, having no understanding of the difference between fiendish species or distant nightmare planes. So right, on Faerun and other things, we know that devils and demons are very, very different things. And they, there's a difference there, especially when it comes to like the Blood War and things. But here in Theros, that's not the case. All demons will also not require food, drink, or sleep. So we have an Aberrant Overlord, which is challenge rating 9. I'm going to assume that all the demons here we're going to see have resistance to cold, necrotic, and immunity to poison in the poison condition. We'll see if that holds true. This one does have some innate spellcasting once a day. It also has this insatiable greed feature. It can sense the presence of gold within 1,000 feet of itself, determine which location has the greatest amount of gold, and can sense the direction to that site. If the gold is being moved, it knows the direction of the movement. I can't locate gold in any thickness of clay or lead, or even a thin sheet blocks a direct path between it. Has magic resistance. Claw attack that does slashing damage and necrotic damage, but it heals half the hit point damages that it deals, the necrotic side anyway. And then Storm of Crows, which is just awesome. A swarm of spectral crows and harpies in a 20-foot radius. They're conjured. Sphere centered on a point it can see within 120 feet. The sphere remains for a minute or until the Overlord loses concentration. So this is concentration as though a spell. It's lightly obscured in difficult terrain. Any creature that moves into the area for the first time must make a con save or take 3d10 slashing damage plus a 3d10 psychic damage. So this is basically like Super Spirit Guardians, and that it doesn't have to be centered on you. It also counts as lightly obscured on top of the difficult terrain, and it does a ridiculous amount of damage. Next up, we have the Eater of Hope. They all seem to have kind of a generic theme of big horns on their heads here. So this is the Aberrant Overlord, and here's the Eater of Hope, I assume. Unless this is the Aberrant Overlord. It does have a fly speed. And maybe this is the Eater of Hope. It's hard to tell which direction we're going in here. Anyway, so Eater of Hope, same resistances as same insatiable greed and magic resistance. So claw attacks, it has Breath of Hopelessness, though. That's its unique thing. Exhales a miasma of underworld winds in a 30-foot cone. A charisma saving throw, interesting. We take 4d12 necrotic damage and be cursed for a minute. While cursed, you take an extra d12 necrotic damage whenever the Eater of Hope hits with an attack. Then we have the Nightmare Shepherd. I'm going to assume this is the Nightmare Shepherd because of the crook here. All right, pretty much the same all around. Aura of Nightmares is new, though. Undead creatures within 30 feet of the Shepherd gain a +5 bonus to attack and damage rolls. When any creature that isn't undead or construct starts its turn within 30 feet of the Shepherd, that creature must make a DC 17 Wisdom saving throw or take 2d10 psychic damage. Man, necromancers. Boy, don't you wish you had that all the time. Huh? That kind of aura just going out from you. Some innate spellcasting and magic resistance. Claws, kind of similar. We see that do slashing and necrotic. Its crook staff there does bludgeoning damage plus 4d12 psychic damage. And then it has its kind of unique thing here is the Herd the Underworld. Recharges on a short or long rest. It pulls twisted souls from the underworld and summons 1d6 shadows. It rises in an area without sunlight weakness, which is a big deal because that makes shadows much more easy to deal with. Aroused in unoccupied spaces within 20 feet. They act right after the shepherd on the same initiative count and fight until they're destroyed. They disappear when the shepherd disappears. So on top of it potentially already having shadows, it can just bring in more in the fight, which is pretty nuts considering they're all going to have these bonuses to them as well. All right, then we have Eidolons here. They are all undead, so they don't require air, food, or drink. So we have a Flitter Step Eidolon, which is a challenge rating 3. I don't believe we have art for that. Immunity to poison, and then the following conditions: charm, exhaustion, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poison, restrained, and resistance to necrotic and non-magical attacks. It has a blurred form. Attack rolls are made at disadvantage, so it kind of has like a displacement feature. It also has evasion as per the rogue. Right, same to half damage. Yep, okay. I think this might be the first time on a non-NPC we've seen true evasion. I could be mistaken, but either way, that's gonna piss off the party. I can tell you that. Incorporeal movement, it can move through other objects, through other creatures and objects if they're difficult terrain. It takes force damage if it ends inside an object. Has turn resistance, so advantage on saving throws against turning effects. And then makes 2 attacks. Immediately before or after one of its attacks, it can use Flitter Step if available. So Flickering Dagger just does a dagger attack that does extra psychic damage, and then Flitter Step is a magical teleport within 30 feet. If it makes an attack immediately after teleporting, it has advantage on the attack roll. That's not too bad. We have a Ghost Blade Eidolon, which we do have art for. Similar, yep, the same resistances and immunities as the one above. Still has blurred form, still has incorporeal movement, still has turn resistance, but its damage and its Ghost Blade increases, right? Dealing a d8 plus 2d10 force damage. Okay, then we have our Fleecemane Lion, which is essentially the Nemean lion, the one that Hercules had to defeat as one of his many labors. And then, you know, he made the armor out of the skin. So that's kind of what this guy is here. And I even think it's part of the lore, right? Overcoming a Fleecemane Lion is widely considered an early step on the road to becoming a true hero. So it is a challenge rating 3. It is a monstrosity. Unfortunately, out there, druids, you won't be able to transform into this, which is a bummer. And it basically is just a souped up lion in a lot of ways, right? It still has keen sense and pounce like a lion typically has. I just have a running leap, which I don't think lions typically have. With a 10-foot running start, they can jump 25 feet long. They do have spell turning. Again, we've seen this come up quite a bit here, where if it's targeted and it succeeds on a saving throw of a spell of 4th level or lower, it is redirected at the target. Bite and claw attack, but this one does have legendary actions, 2 of them. 1 to make a claw action and 2 to roar. Each creature within 60 feet when it roars must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened until the end of the lion's next turn. That's also something to consider, folks, just in general, right? If you want to make a relatively mundane creature into a much more powerful boss battle, giving legendary actions to a lower level creature can do a really good job of making the encounter seem that much more important, right? Even if it's just like an ogre, right? An ogre with a legendary action is a big deal and makes it feel that much more powerful. Where, like, after your turn, it's going to use its legendary action to attack you with its club. And they're like, whoa, legendary actions, that's new. Or even if they're veteran players, like, oh, hold up, this might not be so easy. It's got legendary actions. All right, then next up is giants. We have a Doom Wake Giant, which we can see here. It has immunity to necrotic and poison, and the frightened and poison condition. It has the aura of Erebos. Any creature that starts a turn within 10 feet must make a con save or take necrotic damage and can't regain hit points until the start of their next turn. A successful saving throw makes you immune, and then magic resistance, a slam attack for extra bludgeoning, 3d8 bludgeoning, and extra 3d6 necrotic. And then rather than thrown rocks like most giants, this one has Noxious Gust. It exhales a mighty gust that creates a blast of deadly mist in a 60-foot line that is 10 feet wide. Must make a con save or take 8d8 necrotic damage and be knocked prone. Then we have a 100-handed one. Now, I believe these do exist in Greek mythology, and my basis for this is entirely on Percy Jackson and the various Heroes of Olympus series. So I believe I remember hearing them talking about 100-handed ones, but I'm actually drawing a blank on what they were like in the books. So we're going to learn about the ones for Dungeons & Dragons. Challenge rating 15, immune to frightened. It can take 1 reaction on every turn in combat, which means that's pretty substantial. And it can't be surprised. 4 longsword attacks or 2 rock attacks. This one does have rocks. The longswords do 3d8 plus 8 slashing, and the rocks do 4d10 plus 8 bludgeoning. And they must make a strength save or be knocked prone. And then as a reaction, it has deflect attacks. The giant adds 5 to its AC against 1 weapon attack that would hit it. To do so, it must see the attacker and be wielding a melee weapon. So the point being that it is reactive and can take a reaction on every turn. So every turn, it can potentially add 5 to its AC against a single attack, which I guess is supposed to replicate the, the 100 hands kind of scenario. So that makes sense to me. It seems a little underwhelming in the grand scheme of things, but I've never fought one or thrown one at a player, so I don't really know just yet. Right, if you know anything about Greek mythology, Harpies are a big deal. So it's nice to see some expansion of just the base Harpy that we have in the monster manual. And then it has a little section here on sirens. They're kind of beautiful Harpy with human-like bodies, bird wings, and legs, bright plumage in the shades of blue and purple and green. They use the stat block of the Harpy in the monster manual. Okay, so these are the more nasty Harpies. So this is Amphisbaena. I don't know if this... Okay, the next... Okay, so this is a singular creature. Amphisbaena, the Dissonant Song. Resistance to Necrotic and immunity to Charm and Frightened. 2 legendary resistances and magic resistance. She can make 2 attacks, bite and a claw. Her bite does extra necrotic damage, straight up slashing damage on the claws. But she does have these 2 abilities here. Discordant Song. Each humanoid within 120 feet must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened until the song ends. A frightened creature takes 2d6 psychic damage at the start of its turn while she's singing. A frightened creature can repeat the save at the end of its turn, ending it on a success. If the creature's saving throw is successful or the effect ends for it, the creature is immune. She takes a bonus action on her subsequent turns to continue singing. She can stop singing at any time. It ends if she's incapacitated or died. So in theory, she can keep this up every turn. And then there's also Grave Calling Song. She intones a low growling magical melody. Every undead within 300 feet of her must make a wisdom saving throw or fall under her control. That could be brutal. She must take a bonus action on her subsequent turns to continue singing, and she can mentally command the undead under her control as part of the same bonus action. So this is really bad if you happen to be a necromancer character or someone in your party is. This could be really bad to fight her because she's going to just turn them all against you. And then we have a blood toll Harpy, which is the kind of more nasty Harpy rather than the siren type we mentioned before, but still relatively weak rated, challenge rating a D8. But they have a blood frenzy like a shark, advantage on attack rolls against creatures that don't have full hit points, advantage on saving throws versus charmed and frightened, and then a bite and a claw attack. We have a hippocampus, or this is called a hippocamp, but I believe, so this is a hippocamp, but I believe, hippocampi or hippocampus is the mythological, it's like a water horse, basically. And you can kind of see that in the art here. It is also a monstrosity, unfortunately, druids. You will not be able to transform into this. It can breathe water and air. It can charge. If it moves 20 feet straight towards the creature and hits with a ram attack on the same turn, they're going to take extra bludgeoning damage and be knocked prone. It has a hoof attack and a ram attack. Nothing too crazy. Then we have Hoplites, right? These are kind of your typical, I want to say like your 300 style soldiers, right? With the shield and the spear. You can kind of see them right here. We have unit names for Akroan Hoplites, Meletian Hoplites, and Setessan Hoplites. And then we have different stats for the 3 different groups. So these are more just like standard humanoid, almost NPCs here. So we have the Akroan Hoplite, has Hold the Line. While it is holding a spear, other creatures provoke an attack of opportunity from the Hoplite when they move within 5 feet, so entering the range. When the Hoplite hits a creature with an opportunity attack, the creature takes an extra d8 piercing damage, and the creature's speed becomes 0 for the rest of the turn. Basically, kind of like a Sentinel scenario. Or a Sentinel mixed with Polar Master, but for a spear. I guess Polar Master does work for a spear, but either way. And then it has a spear attack, and it can do a shield bash, which still bugs me that you can't technically attack with a shield in 5th edition as it's written now. Obviously, the DM can rule otherwise, but like if enemies have shield bash attacks, why can't our characters? And in this case, it does a D4 bludgeoning damage, and then if they're medium or smaller, they must make a strength save or be knocked prone. See, then that seems like a thing that anybody should be able to do in my mind, right? I should be able to shield bash and have it basically do the same thing. It does a D4, is the damage that the shield does, and kind of the benefit of it is if they're my size or smaller, I can maybe knock them prone. But I guess maybe that gets in the way of the shield master feat. So Meletian, Hoplites, they have spellcasting, so that's what separates them from everybody else. They have some cantrips and, some decent spells here, right? Invisibility, blur, sleep. Lower levels, these could be pretty nasty. They can make 3 weapon attacks or replace one with Ray of Frost. And then we have the Ray of Frost cantrip here. It's only a D8. Same shield bash and basically the same spear attack. And then the Cetessan Hoplite has pack tactics, so that's pretty powerful. And then again, this one has a scimitar and a longbow, different weapons, but pack tactics is its kind of main thing. Then what would we be in a Greek mythology kind of based thing if we didn't have Hydras? So we do. We have an iron scale Hydra, which is kind of pretty nasty because this is basically an Anvilwrought mechanical clockwork Hydra. It is still considered a monstrosity, though, not considered a construct. It is immune to acid. It has a xenomorph style blood in that its blood is acid. When it takes piercing or slashing damage from a creature within 5 feet, they take 2d8 acid damage. It can hold its breath for an hour, and then it has, as we've seen thus far quite a bit, certain things because of its multiple heads. So while it has more than one head, it has advantage on saving throws against being blinded, charmed, deafened, frightened, stunned, or knocked unconscious. Whenever it takes 35 or more points in a single turn, one of its heads die. If all heads die, it dies. At the end of its turn, it grows 2 heads for each one that was removed, unless it has taken fire damage since the last turn. It regains 10 hit points each time a head is regrown. For each head the Hydra has beyond 1, it can make an extra reaction that can be used for only opportunity attacks. And while it sleeps, at least one of its head is awake, so you're never going to catch it off guard. And then obviously it has a multi-attack, as many bites as it has heads that do 2d10 plus 6 piercing damage. And then we've got Polokranos. I don't have any art for this one, but this looks like a more legendary... Oh, called the World Eater, is a mortal manifestation of the eternal ideal of a Hydra. Well, that's kind of interesting. So this is a challenge rating 19. So looks like a similar version of this iron scale Hydra. Still immune to acid, still has acid blood. To take 3d6 damage. It has 3 legendary resistances. Same benefits of the multiple heads. However, it needs to take 40 damage in a turn for its head to die. And it gets 20 hit points back when a head regrows. Still has reactive heads. Does double damage to objects and structures. Still has the wakeful feature. At many bites as it has heads. But it also has as many bite attacks as it has heads. So I guess to use its stomp or its tail attack, that's its whole action. The tail attack does come with the opportunity to knock somebody 20 feet away. And then legendary actions, make a perception check for 1, which has 3 legendary actions. Make a tail swipe for 1, or trampling charge for 3. It moves up to 50 feet in a straight line, and can move through any space of a creature huge or smaller. The first time it enters a creature's space, it can make a stomp attack against that creature. Then we have a Leonin, at just one singular Leonin as kind of an NPC here, the Leonin Iconoclast, which, as we know, is sort of the character who rejects the gods and does not benefit from piety. Does have evasion as per the rogue ability, innate spellcasting of banishment and detect evil and good. While wearing no armor and no shield, it adds wisdom modifier to its AC, and then just has a claw and dart attack. Nothing too crazy. But this art, for whatever reason, I showed you that one at the beginning of the magic item one, and it just looked weird to me. It just looked out of place. This one looks much more natural to me. All right, now we have the Nyx-Fleece Ram, which is basically our golden fleece maker here. If someone shears a Nyx-Fleece Ram without damaging the creature, it can be made into a magical garment. A wearer who's attuned to the garment as a magic item receives the favor of the gods in the form of one of the following magical benefits. Protection is a +1, so it counts as like a cloak or ring of protection. +1 bonus to AC and saving throws. Advantage on all charisma persuasion checks. Calm emotions once per day. Whenever where the fleece walks, flowers spring up magically behind them and then wilt after an hour. Can cast animal friendship once per day or create food and water once per day. Those are all just each individual garment. Each time you make one would have one of those abilities. And you can see it here. It is also a monstrosity. So sorry again, druids. No crazy combinations of you shifting into a Nyx-Fleece Ram and then having your party shear your fur off to make magical items. Has a charge attack, moves 20 feet, does an extra 2d4 bludgeoning damage, and a strength saver knocking prone. Magic resistance, and then advantage on strength and dex saving throws that would knock it prone. And then again, it's ram attack that does bludgeoning damage with a little bit of force. Then we have some nymphs, right? We're in a Greek mythology. We have satyrs. Makes sense to have nymphs as well. Nymphs do not require food, drink, or sleep. It says the Nymphs of Theros include the following mysterious beings as well as the Dryads from the Monster Manual. We have an Alcid, which is, in this case here, this is sort of a plains-based, meadow-based kind of spirit, if you will. So a medium fey, resistance to radiant poison, resistant to radiant, immunity to poison, charmed, frightened, the poison condition. Advantage on dex checks to hide while in a grassland. We have some innate spellcasting of very, nymph kind of sounding things. Cure wounds, charm person, calm emotions, plant growth, stuff that makes sense. And then magic resistance, and then a melee attack here of radiant touch, dealing some damage there. We have a Lampad, which is basically an underworld spirit, I guess, or yeah, underworld spirit. Resistance to necrotic, still has the same immunities. Corpse Stride. Once on its turn, the Lampad can use 10 feet of its movement to step magically into one creature's corpse within its reach and emerge from a second creature's corpse within 60 feet. Talk about just like macabre and gross. Appearing in an occupied space within 5 feet of the second corpse. We have innate spellcasting and Chill Touch and Gentle Repose. Magic resistance, as I'm assuming all of them have. It can make 2 necrotic touches or use Chill Touch. For 2d8, and then it has the typical benefits of Chill Touch, and then a necrotic touch similar to the radiant touch of the last one. We have a Naiad, which is a water spirit. Resistance to psychic damage. Can breathe water and air. Does have a swim speed. Minor illusion, phantasmal force, fly, and hypnotic pattern. Or was a Naiad an air spirit? I thought a Naiad was a water spirit. So, but the fact that it has fly kind of confuses me. It's invisible when fully immersed in water, magic resistance, and a psychic-based touch attack. And then we have an Oread, which in this is a fire-based spirit. Flames, volcanoes, and so on. Immunity to fire and poison. Same condition immunities. Firebolt at will, Burning Hands, Hellish Rebuke, and Scorching Ray. Is invisible while fully immersed in fire. Has magic resistance. And then its Hellish Rebuke is a reaction, second level, once per day, doing 3d10, similar to what a Tiefling has. Okay, now we're on to Oracles. So, Oracles possess the ability to interpret, right? This is like the Oracle of Delphi, any kind of, they're very common in mythology, someone who can see the future or something like that. Interpreters of divine influence. So this is just an Oracle, right? Here it is. An NPC, a humanoid of some kind. Well, the Oracle's wearing no armor and wielding no shield. They add their wisdom modifier to their AC. And a creature that hits the Oracle with a melee attack takes an extra 2d8 force damage. Makes sense, you're kind of hitting a divine emissary of the gods. Has some spellcasting here, guidance, light, and thaumaturgy, basically like a cleric. Bless, guiding bolt, healing word, hold person, augury, and scrying. Kind of makes sense, augury for the Oracle. An Eldritch Touch, and then reaction 3 times per day is Divine Insight. It can, when a creature it can see is making an attack, roll, ability check, or saving throw, it can give them advantage or disadvantage. We have a Phylaskia, which is what I'm imagining is kind of like your Jason and the Argonauts style skeleton warrior. Armored skeletons guard the borders of the underworld. Okay. So again, if you need a powerful skeleton for your campaign, and you don't want to throw just the base ones from the player's hand, or from the monster manual rather, this is a pretty nasty one. It's wearing plate mail, so its armor class is pretty high. Immunity to necrotic and poison damage, condition immunities of blinded, charmed, deafened, exhaustion, frightened, and poison. It also has true sight, and also no vulnerability to bludgeoning damage. Any creature that starts its turn within 10 feet of it must make a Wisdom saving throw. On a fail, it has disadvantage on saving throws, and its speed is halved until the start of the Phylaskia's next turn, or the start of their next turn. Undead Fortitude. So if it goes to 0 hit points, it makes a con save equal to DC of 5 plus the damage taken, unless it's taken radiant damage or hit from a critical hit, or otherwise it'll bring back up to 1 hit point. You can't be surprised. It makes 2 longswords and uses its strength drain once. The longswords deal 2d8 or 2d10 plus an additional 2d10 necrotic, and the strength drain is 2d6 necrotic damage, and unless the target is immune to necrotic damage, their strength score is reduced by a d4. If their strength score is reduced to 0, they die. Otherwise, the reduction lasts until the target finishes a short or long rest. We have a returned. This was also interesting. A lot of people were thinking the returned would have been like that kind of, there was originally, I think there was the returned rogue, something like that. That would have been printed in this book. A lot of people also thought the Stars Druid would be printed in here. I told you from the beginning, it's only going to be 2 subclasses. Anyway, we have the returned character, an undead, sort of like a revenant-y type character. They need water and air, but not food or sleep. They think and speak and have even emotions based on their new experiences, but given the circumstances, those emotions tend to be muted. As an undead, let's see, we've got immunity to poison and poison condition, resistance to necrotic damage, turn resistance, an unreadable face, is immune to any effect that would sense its emotion or read its thoughts. Insight checks to discern its true intentions are made with disadvantage. It has a scimitar and a sling. Then we have a couple other return. We have a returned Palom Knight, which is, I don't know what that is, but this is slightly different. Same resistances. This one has fleeting anger. If another creature deals damage to it, it makes attack rolls with advantage until the end of its next turn. And then again, short sword that deals extra poison damage, more so than the previous returned Drifter was the first one. Then we have the returned Sentry, which is kind of the slight step above, which has pack tactics and kind of, again, a similar thing. It has a spear that does poison damage and then also a sling. There's also this variant returned Cacomantis. Although the dead typically recall little of their lives, some have an obsession with magic that survives both death and rebirth as a returned. These returned, called Cacomantes, I guess is how you say that, use their magical prowess to control the energy that suffuses the underworld. The returned Cacomantis has the statistics of a returned Palom Knight and uses the following attack action instead of multi-attack. Underworld Bolt, dealing ranged attack, dealing necrotic damage, and the target can't regain hit points until the start of the return's next turn. If it's missing any of its hit points, it takes 2d12 instead. So it's basically like a Toll the Dead spell, but as an attack rather than a saving throw, which I also really like. I would make Underworld Bolt a spell in 5th edition and treat it exactly like you do Toll the Dead, but instead it just does necrotic damage. So it's a d8 necrotic damage. Unless the target is missing any hit points, then it does a d12 necrotic damage, and it just scales up like that. I think that would be a great spell. I'm going to adapt that into my games. I recommend you do as well. Then we have a Satyr, right? Nothing too crazy. We knew Satyrs were going to be in here because they're the new race. Satyr Reveler here has enthralling performance. If it plays for at least 1 minute, it chooses up to 4 humanoids within 60 feet who watched or listened to the entire performance. They must make a wisdom save or be charmed. While charmed in this way, they idolize it and will take part in its revels. The charm condition ends for the creature after 1 hour if it takes any damage, if the satyr attacks its target, or if the target witnesses the satyr attacking or damaging one of its allies. Magic resistance, magic can't put the satyr to sleep, and then it has a ram and short bow attack. Interesting that the Reveler here has immunity to magical sleep, but the base satyr does not. And then we have a Satyr Thornbearer, which looks to be more like a rangery type. Magic resistance, again, Sleepless Reveler. Magic can't put it to sleep. Ram, short bow, and then it has Hail of Arrows. It fires an arrow that magically transforms into a flurry of missiles in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in the area must make a DC 14 dexterity saving throw or take piercing damage, 5d6 piercing damage, half on a success. Then we have Triton. This guy looks pretty nasty here. Triton Shore Stalker. Has typical Triton abilities, Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind. This one can take the Disengage or Hide action as a bonus action. And makes 2 Urchin, Spine, Sword, Short Sword. See, this also feels like the Urchin, Spine, Short Sword should have been a type of weapon or a magic item or something in this book, which is a short sword that deals piercing damage plus 3d6 poison damage. If the damage reduces a creature to 0 hit points, that creature is stable but poisoned for an hour. Even after regaining hit points, is paralyzed while poisoned in this way. And then it has a poison spine attack, which is a ranged weapon. So again, I would add the Urchin Spine Short Sword to my game as a magic item, and potentially something that could be found in like coastal cities or where Tritons hang out. And lastly, we have a Triton Master of Waves, which is more of a spellcastery type. As you can see here by the art of him calling up a wall of water. Actually, no, he doesn't have wall of water. It's Fog Cloud, Gust of Wind, and Wind Wall. Why not wall of water? Don't base Tritons learn Wall of Water? Isn't that a thing they have? Why does this guy not? Anyway, summon Water Weird as a bonus action. It magically summons 1d4 Water Weirds. Appear in an unoccupied space within 60 feet of the Triton. The Water Weirds act immediately after the Triton in the initiative count and fight until they're destroyed. And it can either make 2 attacks using Wave Touch or Ray of Frost. Wave Touch is a melee attack that just deals cold damage, and then Ray of Frost is the cantrip. It also has a reaction of Frigid Shield. When a creature the Triton can see targets the Triton with an attack, the Triton gains 10 temporary hit points. If the attack hits and reduces the temporary hit points to 0, each creature within 5 feet of the Triton takes 2d8 cold damage. That's cool. I love that ability. That's really awesome. And then next up we have Typhon. So Typhon, aka the Titanic horrors of writhing flesh and gnashing maws, Typhon slither through the underworld seeking only to consume. Looks like just a bunch of dragon, snake, lizard mouth things. So it is challenge rating 15. Is a monstrosity, immune to necrotic and acid damage. Has keen smell, has regeneration. It regains 10 hit points at the start of its turn. If it takes radiant damage, this doesn't function at the start of its turn. It dies only if at the start of its turn, only if it starts its turn with 0 hit points and doesn't regenerate, similar to a troll. Multi-attack, it makes 3 attacks, one with its flurry of bites, which is just awesome name for an attack, 1 constrict, and 1 with its maw. Flurry of Bites does 8d6 plus 7 piercing damage. Constrict is typical constrict attack. Bludgeoning damage, the target is grappled. They're grappled and restrained, and they take bludgeoning damage at the start of each of their turns. It can have 2 creatures constricted, and then its maw does 3d12 piercing damage plus 3d12 acid damage. It's also just awesome to look at. This art is really good. Again, I gotta say, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of these are on Magic cards. And I'm a big fan. That was kind of one of my favorite things when I did used to collect Magic cards way back when Alpha and Beta were coming out. Was just the cards and like the flavor text on the cards was one of my favorite things. Mind you, I was very young when that happened, but anyway. And then our last monster here, because I think we're going to save the Mythic monsters because this is a pretty long video as it is. Mythic monsters will be the last video, but we have the Woe Strider, which is terrifying. I feel like this should be an aberration. Turns out it is. Woe Striders form from the souls of those who've broken the bonds of destiny. Who've broken the bonds of destiny. So they are immune to frightened. They have telepathy. They have an anti-magic cone, similar to a beholder. It's an anti-magic cone, a 60-foot cone. At the start of its turns, the Woe Strider decides which way the cone faces and whether its mouth is open or closed. So its mouth, similar to Beholder's central eye being the anti-magic, the mouth of the Woe Strider is the anti-magic cone. That has multi-attack, 2 claw attacks and 1 bite attack. If both claws hit the same creature, the target is grappled. Claws do a d6 slashing plus a d6 psychic, and the bite is 1 creature that is grappled, incapacitated, or restrained. It does 2d8 piercing plus 3d10 psychic. In addition, each magic item the creature is carrying that isn't an artifact has its magical properties suppressed for 1 minute. So that's pretty bananas. I was going to say I originally didn't know why it was Challenger rating 7, but that further explains why. It also looks like it's a mouthful of eyeballs, which is also just unsettling. So yeah, that is all of the new monsters, not including the mythic monsters, which I believe are 3 different options, which we'll save for a future video. When I say a future video, I mean the next one. So yeah, that's all of the monsters here in Mythic Odysseys of Theros. Just looking at it, trying to figure out what my personal favorites were. I like the Anvilwroughts. I liked specifically the Anvilwrought Raptor could be a familiar option. I'm a big fan of that. I liked the idea of the Fleecemane Lion. I'm not too keen on the actual creature. The Hydras were cool. I like Hydras in general because I have, again, a very big love for mythology, so Hydras mean a lot to me personally. I like the idea of the Nyx-Fleece Ram's magic items that it can make. I like the Typhon just because the art was cool. But I probably also really like the Triton Master of Waves because of its Frigid Shield reaction ability. That is something I would add as a magic item, or maybe a specific magical set of armor. I would add that to something, right? So as a reaction, when you're hit with an attack, you can gain 10 temporary hit points, and if it reduces it to 0, it's going to deal like a blast of cold damage with this Frigid Shield. I think that is definitely prime picking for a magic item or a suit of magic armor. So let me know what you think in the comments. Which one is your favorite new monster added in Mythic Odysseys of Theros? I don't know why I expected more monsters. There's a decent amount, don't get me wrong, but I expected more, and I don't really know why that is. I was thinking maybe like a really cool Pegasus, right? That's it's mythology based, but maybe that's not because it's covered in the regular Pegasus in the monster manual. Same thing with with like a crazy spider creature, because we saw that Arasta of the Endless Webs extracts her undying revenge upon 2 more champions of the gods. And I didn't see Arasta, unless she's one of the mythic monsters. She is, never mind, that's why. So we'll get to her in the next video. So cancel that question. Anyway, let me know what your favorite monster is in the comments down below. And let me know if there's anything you were specific, especially if you're a Magic fan who has better knowledge of Theros in general. Let me know if there's a type of monster or a specific monster you are really hoping to see be added in Mythic Odysseys of Theros and it didn't make it in for whatever reason. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support the channel. And hey, we're approaching 40,000 subscribers right now. My goal is 50,000 by my birthday in July. Maybe we'll hit 40,000 by the end of June, and that would be pretty cool too. So thank you all so much for watching again, and I'll see you next time.